Hi everyone, it's Lisa from A Simple Season. If we look at the Great Depression as a time in our past, we'll notice that a lot of the historical accounts tend to focus on how it affected banks, industry, and politics. But if we take a closer look, we can discover how families develop strategies to deal with the adjustment of harder times in their daily life. And we can look at how this particular time in history affected and permeated everyone's life, and we can have a deeper understanding of how things worked and how they survived this time period. While many people had their hours cut or their wages cut or they lost their jobs completely, many families did their best to adjust to the harder times. And one of the ways that they did this was to change their household routines. What people ate during that time really depended upon their circumstances. If someone in the family was lucky enough to have a job, they may have gone to the soup kitchen at lunchtime to allow what little food was at their home to be eaten by the rest of the family. If you were among the least fortunate, some people were eating every other day. Middle-class families, even though their income was reduced greatly, they were still able to buy things at the store. But things like meat were very expensive, so they were learning to use things like oats, cornmeal, potatoes, lentils to round out their meals and make them more substantial. And judging by the food and clothing ads of the day, families were encouraged to take care of children and anyone else living in the home without spending money, so they had to find creative ways to do this. One housewife tells a story about how you could buy 2 pounds of ground beef for 25 cents in those days, and she didn't have enough money to buy the full 2 pounds for herself. So what she did was she split the cost with her neighbor, and then one week she would pay the extra penny, and then the next week her neighbor would pay the extra penny, and that's how they were able to each have a pound of ground beef for the week. Given that some people's salaries were reduced by half or more, people were coming up with ingenious ways to make their items stretch. So things like repairing shoes with rubber tires or even pieces of cardboard became very common. Extended families were moving in together to help cut costs. Since it was less expensive to support one household with 2 or 3 families contributing to the utilities than running one household per family. And also people were giving up certain luxuries like getting haircuts or going to the barber in favor of doing these things themselves at home. Potlucks also became very popular, with places like churches and different social organizations putting them together because it was a great way to share food with a larger number of people and an easy way to socialize. And when it came to schooling, education just went by the wayside during the Great Depression because there was very little money to buy school supplies, and a lot of school programs just closed because there was lack of funding. And by 1934, a lot of schools closed altogether. And a case in point is this is what happened to my father. He was born in 1928 and he had a grade 5 education. School was just not a priority because the family needed all of the able-bodied people that they could have to help work their farm. And a lot of kids quit going to school so that they could help earn money for the family, either by selling newspapers or selling subscriptions to a magazine for different companies or shining shoes. Kids did a lot of work to help bring in money so that the family could survive. Also, the humble kitchen garden made a resurgence with people planting things like lettuce, potatoes, and herbs so that they could make their meals more substantial, round them out, and feed themselves a little bit better and become a little more self-sufficient. Also, people organized gardens in public spaces. For example, in Detroit in 1931 and 1932, the public space gardens provided vegetables for over 20,000 people. And it was wonderful because you had experienced gardeners passing on their knowledge to people with less experience and showing them how to do things. People also foraged a lot in those days. And the nice thing about springtime is lilacs are in bloom. And lilacs are edible and they can be made into a tea. They have a delicate flavor and can be used as a mild digestive aid. So we're going to cut some of these and turn these into a refreshing drink. Our lilac sprigs are nicely washed, and now what we're going to do is just pick off the flowers, and you want to avoid the green stems because they can taste quite bitter. If you get a little bit of them in there, it's okay, but just try to avoid them as much as possible. And I have 3 sprigs here, so 3 sprigs will make about 3 to 4 cups of your lilac iced tea. So here's our beautiful flowers all done, and now we'll just take them and put them in the teapot. And this is totally optional, but I like to add a tablespoon or 2 of honey. And you don't have to add any sweetener, or you can add a little more if you like. And now we're going to let this steep for an hour. Okay, so now I've got my lilacs doing their thing in the fridge, and I'm going to show you something else that Depression era folks did, because it's springtime now and they definitely would have got their garden started. So today we're going to be planting some potatoes, and I plant my potatoes in these Rubbermaid tubs, and I like them because they're nice and deep. I think this one's about 20 inches deep. I do have a garden, but I like to conserve that space for things like tomatoes and zucchini, and I just find it easy to plant potatoes in these Rubbermaid tubs. So you just drill a few holes in the bottom of it and you're good to go. So I have my seed potatoes here, and these are just grocery store potatoes that have started to sprout. And these sprouts are called chits. And the size of container that I have, I'm going to put in 3 potatoes, and I'll show you how we plant them. So this is how I'm going to place my potatoes, and what I'm going to do is I've filled this up with dirt and a little bit of peat moss, because you want the soil nice and loose, because potatoes love nice loose soil. So I put my dirt in, and then I just dig a hole kind of close to the bottom, and I'm going to put my potato in with the sprouts pointing upwards and cover it over with dirt. And this is so great because even if you live in an apartment and you have a sunny balcony, you can still plant potatoes. And that's all there is to it. Now we give it a nice water and put it in a sunny spot. Here's some that I planted a few weeks ago, and you can see how nicely the plants have come up. So in a few weeks, they'll start to get some nice little white flowers on them, which means you have potatoes, which is great. And then probably by around the end of July or so, the plants will start to turn brown and die back, and then you'll know it's time to harvest the potatoes. During the Depression era, people grew a lot of potatoes because they were one of the more filling vegetables that you could grow. And as you can see, they're super easy to take care of, and even if you're limited for space, they're a good option to have in your garden. So I think we'll head back inside and we'll see how our lilacs are doing. I've taken our lilac tea out of the fridge. It's been in there a couple of hours, and you can see it's turned this really beautiful kind of light purpley color. And I have just a pitcher with a little bit of ice. And now what I'm going to do is just take the juice of half a lemon and squeeze it into the pitcher. And we'll add a few lemon slices too. And now we just strain our tea into the pitcher. And now you have a lovely, refreshing drink for a warm day. I have tremendous respect for the people that made it through this time period when there was very little government assistance. Just by being resourceful, tough-minded, and adaptable, they truly were the greatest generation. So hopefully this gave you a little glimpse as to what life was like during the Great Depression, and I feel there's always something valuable we can learn from history and apply to our own lives today. So take care, everyone. Thanks so much for joining in. Stay well, and we'll catch you in the next one.